Matt's gonna teach you guys how to solder.
One of those things that the fine details totally messes you up if you don't know them. You actually don't melt the solder with the soldering iron.
I'm gonna see if I can use those steps to do this. Hello and welcome to Gearhead 704. I'm Matt, and today what we're doing is a how-to video. Haven't done one of those in a little while, but wanted to get one out. Recently, I covered on the channel how I went ahead and put new fog light connectors. I actually put a whole new headlight harness on my car over there. And in that video, I really glossed over the whole process of how to solder. I did have to solder new fog light connections at the time, and that is actually what I'm doing in this video. It's a full how-to. Matt's gonna teach you guys how to solder on video, and then I'm gonna try and go ahead and solder in my fog light connectors. So we're gonna go ahead, run through that, and it should be a lot of fun. We do these occasionally on the channel. We've got a whole playlist on these videos, so if you wanna see other how-tos, I will leave a link to that in the description below. But now I'm gonna go ahead, get started on soldering. We're gonna actually bring in Matt. We're at Fox Mustang Restoration. He's gonna explain how to do it, and then I'm gonna try it, and then we'll see if the fog lights work afterwards. Like I said, we are going to be hooking these up to the headlight harness, soldering them using some heat shrink. Matt's here to show me how to do it because I haven't done it before.
I'm going to teach you how to solder two wires together, the correct way to do it. A lot of people don't know all that's into soldering. They think it's simpler than it is, and it's one of those things that the fine details totally messes you up if you don't know them. So the first thing is you need to make sure your soldering iron's clean. I have a rag here. It's wet, pretty wet right there. So you got to have a really wet rag, and you get your soldering iron really hot, maximum operating temperature for what you're going to use it for. And you're going to clean, this is how you clean the soldering iron. So you just simply wet rag, sizzles, and then you see that the tip comes off nice and silver again. And then after that, after you clean it, you have to tin it. This is what you call tinning it. So you're just going to put a little bit, tinning it is simply just putting a little bit of solder on there. And the reason we do that is because when you're transferring the heat from the soldering gun to the wire, you use a little bit of solder to bridge that gap so you transfer the heat properly or as quick as you can. If you don't use that, you almost never get the wire hot enough to solder. Let's go ahead, we're gonna solder these two wires together. I have heat shrink. You wrap it around a wire. If you use a little bit of heat, it shrinks around the wire. It's a good insulation. I use butt connectors, but I don't use the one with the plastic covering. I get them, I think you buy them 100 a pack, and you get all the different gauges, and they're just simply the butt connector without the plastic insulation. Got a couple different tools here. You got simple wire stripper, right? This does a lot of other things that I'll use this for because this works better. But I use this to strip the wire, and this right here I use to cut here and crimp here. You see it's got that little notch cut out. So when you put the butt connector in there, you can see it'll pinch it closed. So now we got our tools straight. Let's go ahead and solder two wires together. And you need to make sure you got bare wire, like that. And you see the wire stripper has two different ends. One end grabs the wire and the other end will strip it off. If you go the other way, it won't work very well. That's it, it just simply comes off. I didn't get quite enough there. Make sure you knock the old piece out because otherwise it jams it up. So you need to make sure that your tool is nice and clean to get a good strip out of it. Got our wire, you twist them together nice and tight. That's a little long, so I'll cut that down a little bit. Do the same thing right here. Twist it together nice and tight. Now normally if we're soldering something, we're not gonna have open ends. So we're gonna do this like we're actually doing it on a car. So you cut the amount of heat shrink that you need, and you need to make sure that you put this over the wire before you solder it together. You cannot do it afterwards because then if you split it down the middle to wrap it around the wire, it's not gonna work. So you need to cut the piece off that you need, slide it down around the wire, but you need to make sure it's far enough away from the heat when you're soldering that it won't shrink. If I solder this and that heat shrinks right there, the first couple of centimeters of that's gonna shrink and gonna be unusable, and then you gotta cut it and put a new piece on. So make sure that's all the way down there. You're gonna get your butt connector, put it in the crimp part there. Gonna put one wire through, crimp it as tight as you can get it. Nice crimp right there. We're gonna do the other side. Now you only got to put heat shrink on one side because you've only got, you know, one junction to cover. So we're gonna give that a nice crimp. That's crimped together real nice. A lot of people may be okay to go with that there, but without soldering that, that's actually still leaves quite a few possibilities of loose connections, corrosion over time to loosen it up, stuff like that. So now this is where the soldering comes in. So we're gonna go back to this, just from the heat that's oxidized a little bit and it's not quite as silver as it was. So we're gonna go ahead, you wanna have a clean soldering iron before every time you solder. So nice sizzle right there. Get the paper towel off. Nice silver again. We're gonna tin it, as in T-I-N, tinning. Gonna put a little bit on there. Now this is where the crucial part comes in on soldering. You gotta have that little bead of solder right there, because that's gonna act as a bridge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna touch that little dollop of solder to that butt connector. Now that soldering iron is transferring that heat from the soldering iron through that little bit of solder into the butt connector. The butt connector is then gonna transfer that heat to the wire. And when you're ready to solder, you actually don't melt the solder with the soldering iron. You melt it with the heat that you put into the wire. And you can see, get that off, that's nice and solid now. So we're gonna do the other side. Do a little dollop. Gonna heat the other side. And I'm gonna touch the solder to the wire as soon as it heats up enough. And what that does, the solder will actually flow into the heated wire. So now, take a good look at that. You can see that wire where there used to be copper wire right here. Now it's all solder. The solder sucked in between all the strands on the wire and actually filled the gap in the butt connector where the wire is crimped in. So from this point to this point, not only is that copper wire and a butt connector, that's one solid piece of solder. And again, you're not gonna like melt the solder onto here to put it into the wire. You use a little bit of solder to heat the butt connector, which heats the wire, and then you melt the solder onto the hot wire. Then it sucks through the strands in the hot wire inside the butt connector. That's how you get a real solid, correct solder. Now, this is where our heat shrink comes in. You wanna let this cool down a little bit, because if you put it on too soon, start to shrink the heat shrink. But you'll put that on. This is a slightly too big of a heat shrink for this wire, but gives you the idea. You just use a lighter. See, it kind of shrinks. I don't flip it around, do the other side. And then that right there, that's a sealed soldered wire repair. The correct way, you'll never have a problem. That's never gonna pull out. It's not gonna corrode. You're gonna have good conductivity, and that's how you do it.
All right guys, Matt has now shown us how to solder, or shown me, and I'm gonna see if I can use those steps to do this. So I'm gonna go ahead for the fog lights. That's what I'm doing this for. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my wires to length and just get started. Now we're gonna do all this on time lapse. So let's see how I do, and I'll show you guys the results at the end. Guys, I got my fog lights. I was able to do it my very first time trying to solder and everything. I got the butt connectors in there and kind of the whole process that Matt just walked you through. I just did that. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. There we go. I know you guys saw it kind of in time lapse, but got the heat shrink around it. And yeah, we've got a good fog light connection now. So I've got to do the other side as well. I'm not going to do that on film. I'm just going to go ahead and get it done. And I'll catch up with you guys after. We'll make sure it works. You guys, finished the soldering, all done, and you can see the results. Looks pretty good. I know I had this in another video, kind of showed you guys, but this was not the how-to. So the how-to is pretty much done, and yeah, it worked. We'll do another check-in soon. I actually have more soldering to do because my brake light, maybe I should show you guys, it's pretty bad. I'm gonna show you pretty soon what I did, or you can check out that video if you wanna see what I did before I soldered. That video is atrocious. You guys should definitely see how I did it incorrectly with my third brake light in the back. I have a video all about that, and it was the improper way to do it. So if you want to see the wrong way to fix stuff, check that out. But that's it for this one. Like I said, we got a lot of other how-tos. So I know it was a short one, but trying to bring you the information right away. So that's it for this one. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you're stopping in for the first time, you want to see more how-tos, please subscribe. And we'll see you here next time on Gearhead 704. So we'll do another check-in. Oh, what's that sideways there? Oh, there we go. Matt's here to show me how to do it because I haven't done it before.
And let me go get the butt connector that we need.
Okay. And I did my emergency. No, is there emergency brake light? I don't think so. There's emergency brake, not an emergency brake light. No, it's an old brake light. It's an emergency special. No. My third brake light. Oh, okay.